As more and more people are dying from coronavirus, take a look at the way, in a just casual little chat, Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly talked about this.
But I want life back to normal. Can you fix that in a simple way?
Oh, man, I wish I could, you know.
Oh, me too.
But we're making little steps. Bernie Sanders, he's gone. That's really good for everybody. The projections, as you just mentioned, are down to 60,000. I don't think it'll be that high. 13,000 dead now in the USA. Many people who are dying both here and around the world were on their last legs anyway, and I don't want to sound callous about that.
Oh, you're going to get hold on. You're going to get hammered for that.
I mean, a simple man tells the truth.
Well, and, you mean people that have underlying conditions and compromised immune systems? Any virus, you're saying would.
Okay, yes. So Dr. Bill O'Reilly, who he believes the numbers will be even lower, based on what? Nothing. He doesn't know anything. He literally knows nothing. And any infection would have finished them off because he's a doctor and he knows that they were on their last legs. Why are we freaking out about these people dying?
I also like a simple. These must be the two most complicated men in America. If, in fact, a simple man tells the truth.
Yes, they're quite complex. And by the way, so, look, I thought about going back, and in the end, I didn't care enough to actually go back and pull quotes or anything. But the idea that if people are old, and if people are sick, and especially if they're old and sick, and they're close to death anyway, honestly, just let them die. That's their approach to this. How many videos do you think they made attacking death panels under Barack Obama under the ACA? The conspiracy theory that they had. The idea that you wouldn't care about extending every life as long as possible. They were so incensed by that, fired up for literally years to attack Obama about that. Now it's like, okay, so like 14,000 older sick people died. Why are we criticizing the president over this? It's a bit of hypocrisy.
It's inconsistent, but it's also the benefit of the audience they have now, because what Donald Trump has done, and we know this, has brought a lot of people into being interested in this, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's at the voting booth, in different ways. People who were not interested in politics, who paid zero attention to it. Everything that happens, every word that's said to this audience, and not to all of them clearly, but to many of them, is new. So context and what you may have said about death panels doesn't matter, because all that these people know is what has happened since Donald Trump has risen in American politics. And so it's actually a benefit. It's a nice luxury for these people to have. But of course, we're here to say why it's so dangerous and why it is such an incredible lack of integrity as well. And that's the big part of it. But it really is an amazing dynamic that you're speaking to people who know nothing about history very often in history. And that's an important advantage.
Yeah, love, by the way, also that after all that we found out about Bill O'Reilly, him being driven effectively out of show business as a result of it, Sean Hannity still has him on. Like, he's still buddies. What does it matter if he ruined women's careers, was a predator for a number of years? Let's chat, buddy. Let's talk about how it's not a problem that thousands are dying literally every day. And by the way, while Bill O'Reilly, and to a lesser extent there, Sean Hannity, are just absolutely horrendous in the way that they're addressing this. As I alluded to earlier, it is coming in a number of different forms. So let's see, you have Tucker Carlson every night is doing shows about how it's not as bad as we thought it might be. And that, by the way, again, you have to understand context. He's not saying that and thus saying, and thank you to all of the responsible medical professionals who advocated for social distancing and staying at home. It looks like it's working. He's saying this was all a waste. We shouldn't have done it. We should start up the economy. And it's like we said at the very beginning, the goal of all of these measures will be, hopefully, to be so successful that we will be attacked as having over-responded effectively. And we're seeing that already. Even though he said those two shows where he has made it effectively, this isn't that bad, have been the 2 days with the most deaths nationwide from coronavirus. I don't know what today is going to look like. I hope that it plummets. But if it's high, I don't anticipate that he's going to backtrack off of this narrative.
Right. And I forget who it was or if it was somebody talking about this, so I don't have the specifics on this, but someone was talking about how the Democrats want people out of work to make it look like the Trump economy is bad, and they want more people to die to make it look like Trump didn't do enough, which is obviously not true for 99.999% of people who are Democrats or otherwise who are Americans. The other part that I think you should also notice is Tucker Carlson is the person who has Bill O'Reilly's time slot. So there's a great consistency across the grid at Fox.
That is true, and the consistency goes even further. Laura Ingram's show last night was flawed projections sparked panic, and so again, we should not have locked everything down. It was a big waste, and that was last night. This morning, Brian Kilmeade took a scornful tone as he talked about the projections, saying, quote, "The fact is, when somebody says 200,000 people die, oops, I mean 60,000, and it's not going to be right away, it's going to be in August. That's how good we are doing and how off the models were. You have to wonder, as much as social distancing is working, I wonder if the economists are going to get in that room and say we have to stand up this economy in some way before we're not going to be able to stand up when this is all said and done." So really fast, because we have a follow-up immediately to that, but so he says, oops, it's only 60,000. That's nothing. I mean, so we lose like a Vietnam of American citizens. Like, who cares about that? Acknowledges the social distancing is working and potentially is the cause for the numbers being revised down, and says, but even so, let's let some economists in. Even though the economists are saying that you will do devastating damage to the economy if you send people back to work and many more people die. Thankfully, really fast, in response to that, Steve Doocy says, right, but Brian, it's still 60,000 people, which is a staggering number. So he's, as always, the voice of reason there.
Yeah, I mean, and, it's whatever comparisons you want to make. If you want to make latter-day comparisons, you say 17 9/11s. You can just keep going and putting it into the vernacular of today, and it's just as astonishing. I mean, thank God for Steve Doocy, but he'll probably be fired.
I think he'll probably change his tune. He does occasionally, him and Brian Kilmeade will occasionally say something sort of reasonable. And it's a trap to give them credit because it almost always is an outlier that won't be sustained. And I want to say one other thing about this, because the saying that the numbers are made up, obviously, I hate that they're doing that. I hate how just everyday and normalized spreading, baseless conspiracy theories have become, even for the most well-known, most watched, highest paid people in media. But the argument they're making there that if only 60,000 people die, then it will have been a waste to have shut down the economy. That bothers me because it's not like we haven't gone to great lengths and spent tons of money to avoid loss of life in other areas. You made the reference to 9/11, that this is potentially going to be many times over 9/11. So when 9/11 happened, we lost thousands of American lives. And if we assume that the politicians in their response to it were being honest, which I don't assume, but if we do assume it, all of the actions they took that they said were designed to stop that from happening again, how many years of war did we launch? How many trillions of dollars did we spend? How many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of civilians abroad had to die because we wanted to stop 3,000 Americans from dying in another 9/11? So we were willing to do all of that, and continue to, by the way. We're still at war in multiple countries as a result of it. That is stretched, for many people watching the show, that's been their entire life, the response to 9/11. But we've shut down the economy for less than a month now, and Fox News can't wait to get things started. This is unacceptable. Decades of war, trillions of dollars spent, that's okay if it hypothetically saves American lives, but to definitely save far, far more American lives, I mean, we can't have the NASDAQ go down. That's not acceptable. I'm heavily invested. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
And the other, I mean, just on that quickly, John, is that, had we not shut down the economy, had we not shut it all down, it's obvious what would have happened. We have doctors telling us we're saving lives every day because of it. So it's ridiculous. And that the inverse is always something you have to look at.
Yeah. And by the way, I saw someone mentioned in the comments, but there are, news broke this morning that the federal support is imminently ending for coronavirus testing sites, the public ones, as the pandemic peak nears. And look, I hope that it is the peak. I mean, we're projecting at this point. It's not like we called up the pandemic and asked, and it was like, yeah, we're gonna peak around Saturday. We hope that if they open things back up, that we won't have, we won't double dip into it. But the only way we'll know.
But if it's the peak in New York, if it's peak in California and Louisiana and Illinois, but it's not the peak in South Dakota. It's not the peak in Iowa. It's not the peak in other states, and it could just go right back up. I mean, there's no uniformity of how we're dealing with this, other than on a federal level and with banking, et cetera. And that's not even uniform. But the notion that just because it goes down in places that are quote unquote important, those aren't the only important places. A, and B, it hasn't even begun to go up on a curve in some of these other states.
Yeah, let alone in Wisconsin, we can expect that in 10 to 14 days, we'll probably see a massive increase in numbers because they went ahead with the voting. Yeah, we don't have any better medicine against it, and it's not like its power, its vigor wanes with the phases of the moon. It's every bit the disease it was 2 weeks ago. It's just that people are getting kind of frustrated and a little bit bored, I think. For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.